Hello, I'm Drew Roth, a senior here at Humboldt State University. Today, we'll be showing you the efforts of the students in Dr. Reitzel's Fall Semester 2019 Communication 490, the Capstone experience, in creating and performing a manuscript speech as part of the Communication Perspectives Project. We hope you enjoy the fruits of many hours of research in speech writing and come away enlightened by the topics we wish to shed light on.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Saeteurn. Protest and social movements are essential for disadvantaged and excluded groups to achieve representation on various platforms. Throughout the past, those who have found themselves being underrepresented or misrepresented have created debate and discussion through protest and social movements. Now, with current issues established around the world, it is ever important to understand and see how these tactics are helped to serve people. I would like to discuss 3 points that would help provide clarity as to how these tactics are able to create representation. One is the ability to gather outside the formal institution. Second, together, those groups hold power that could influence business. Lastly, they bring forth discussion on issues that are presented in government. To my first point, the ability to gather outside of formal institutions that might hinder a group's goal is essential to create representation. The book, When Protest Makes Policy, How Social Movements Represent Disadvantaged Groups, written by Laurel Weldon, states mobilization of socially and economically disadvantaged groups is more easily undertaken in the informal, fluid world of social movements. Because formal institutions tend to disempower and exclude groups, it is important to note and see how groups can be disempowered in formal institutions. Disempowerment by ways of stating or refuting that a topic is or is not an issue, how important an issue is, and how these issues should be handled. In a social movement or protest, those within are able to showcase how important a situation could be. They are able to evaluate those issues to the body of government and ideally create a policy that would be able to satisfy the needs of their group. It demands for a discussion that would otherwise not happen if not for the ability to gather outside the formal institution. When gathered and needs pointed out, a platform is called for. That discussion is then pointed at the government. They receive the platform for representation through policies that would be effective. To my second point, that is, groups hold power that could influence business. An example of how social movements and protests influence business is written down in the book, How Change Happens, Why Some Social Movements Succeed While Others Don't, by Leslie R. Crutchfield. The book's example states, Moms demand action launch Skip Starbucks Saturday in protest of open carry laws. Protests like these have persuaded companies like Starbucks and Target to post signs that encourage customers to please leave guns outside. The ability to influence the business is tremendous, as it deals with the company's profit and image. If a social movement is directly impacted a company's sale, the company responds to the fluctuation. This has been seen numerous times by various companies. If a business is part of the reason why a disadvantaged or excluded group does not receive representation, the ability to influence the business sales holds weight as to how that protest or social movement is able to create discussion. The example provided earlier exhibited a way as to how a business could react to a demand. If a business is willing to respond and act, room for discussion is created for the group. It also serves to show as representation as a group has created a change or shift within the system. Continuing, business hold power in the political spectrum. Being a part of the debate of how businesses should operate serves as a means of representation for the group. If they share their needs and if an outcome derives from that need, a platform is given to that group. On to my final point, groups who are disadvantaged or excluded bring forth discussion that are not presented in government. Those who are disadvantaged or excluded face adversity different to those who are not. From there, they obtain experience, knowledge, and methods to adapt to those adversities presented to them. In Hank Johnson's book, States and Social Movements, Hank states, today, far from being extraordinary, social movements play integral roles in modern democracies. They call attention to issues that are not represented in party platforms. They are the primary vehicles by which citizens express claims and discontent between collections. Through social movements, they take their experience, knowledge, and methods to the role of democracy. As Hank stated, they express their discontent and claims within the party platforms. Hank, stating social movements being integral, signifies how important it is that groups are disadvantaged or excluded contribute to democracy by protesting or creating social movements. It is becoming ever so clear with technology and the internet. Forms of social media has made communication between people much more accessible. They're able to share, discuss, and debate and form their opinions on a grander scale. When an event occurs that affects a wide scale of people, they are able to express their will through forms of social media and share their discontent of the event. Representation through this form of protest is much more accessible for audience to see. In conclusion, protest and social movements are integral for representation of groups of the disadvantaged and excluded. By gathering outside the lines of formal institutions, they are able to form their opinions without restrictions or limitations. It is also much more accessible through protests and social movements for people to get involved. Second, being able to influence business operates as a means for representation. If they were able to influence business, they were able to generate discussion for representation. Last point, those who are disadvantaged or excluded bring forth different perspectives to issues surrounding party platforms. Protests and social movements through the internet and social media only heightens the ability to share and discuss the roles of democracy. In those ways, protests and social movements are key for representation for those groups.
Hello, my name is Naomi Rodriguez, and today I will be talking about gender in Fall Out Boy's music videos. In their music video, Champion, Fall Out Boy attempts to empower their listeners by prompting us to question and revision how we see the world around us. The music video shows different characters attempting to overcome obstacles in their lives, showing how they find the strength to continue working hard every day by focusing on their dreams or by choosing to live momentarily in a virtual reality. When the song first came out in July of 2017, it was advertised on the band's Twitter page with this quote stating the purpose of the music video: "I can't think of a worse drug than fake reality." We create and can be whoever we want, yet our choices often leave us lonely and unfulfilled. Smash the fake reality. Don't just sit around and kill time. And while I love Fall Out Boy and the empowering message of Champion that encourages us to push through our obstacles by smashing the fake reality and creating our own realities, I have mixed feelings about how Fall Out Boy uses gendered stereotypes to connect with us without explicitly addressing how gender norms and gender stereotypes also help create the fake reality that often leaves us feeling lonely and unfulfilled. By not explicitly addressing how gender norms help create the fake reality they want us to destroy, Fall Out Boy runs the risk of further disempowering the listeners they seek to empower. In order to explain how the band risks further disempowering the listeners, I first need to discuss how gendered communication, like a drug, affects our lived experiences. Then, discuss how Fall Out Boy reinforces gender norms through their use of stereotypes and gender policing in their music video. So, let's talk about drugs. Drugs are substances that, when taken, alter the shape and or function of our brains and bodies, consequently altering how we experience and express ourselves in the world, which is not exactly a bad thing. At some point in our lives, most of us have taken at least one drug, whether it be a natural remedy, an over-the-counter or prescription medication, or a recreational substance such as nicotine or alcohol. This is not to praise or blame the use of drugs, but to better convey a consensus on drugs that we all often forget to acknowledge when the conversations around drugs often focuses on whether they are good or bad. We sometimes choose to take drugs because we feel discomfort or a disconnection within ourselves or with our environment. And these drugs help us to experience and express ourselves the way we want to. Gender communication works in a similar way, and like the use of some drugs, it is not exactly a bad thing. For example, gender identity labels allow us to communicate others information about our experiences and how we see ourselves. When we choose to share that information, it allows us to convey how we wish to be known as and how we engage with the world around us. Gender communication does become a problem, however, when it becomes normalized or when it is used to police others. There is a reason why doctors recommend never giving your medication to other individuals. No two people are the same. What may work for us may harm others. Gender norms and gender policing work in a similar way. On their website, the European Institute for Gender Equality defines gender norms as the ideas, standards, and expectations of how women and men should be, act, and generally conform to. According to Planned Parenthood's website, this includes the idea that women are expected to be polite, accommodating, and nurturing, as well as the idea that men are expected to be strong, aggressive, and bold. Gender policing is the use of threats, violence, and other more subtle acts to force an individual to express themselves according to the gender norms of the gender other individuals perceive them to be. Gender policing and norms are problematic because they both dismiss the gender identities individuals self-identify as and restrict them from expressing themselves the way they want to without the fear of retaliation. Unfortunately, through the use of stereotypes and inclusion of gender policing scenes in their music video, Fall Out Boy reinforces these same gender norms that harm many individuals in real life. For example, in one scene, we see a female actor that just won an award, but the only thing that the press chooses to cover about her are the details of her recent divorce and miscarriage. Even though this actor is clearly very good at her job, the press reduces her achievements and value to what she can or cannot do in her private life, including whether or not she can or cannot have children or be a good wife. According to communications scholar Hinda Mandel in her 2015 article, this is unfortunately common in real life. Mandel explains how press coverage of women in scandals often focuses on their gender and heavily criticizes whether or not these women fit within the gendered expectations of women to be nurturers and good wives. It's possible the band could have purposely included the scene to increase awareness of how the press gender polices women, or of how the press reinforces gender norms by focusing on women's private lives instead of their work achievements. However, the band decides to end this scene with the actor internally upset, but forcing herself to stay silent and compose in front of the press. Whether intentional or unintentional, by choosing to end the scene with the actor politely silent against the press's gender policing of her, Fall Out Boy communicates the idea that gender norms and gender policing are okay, when in fact they are not. Gender norms and gender policing harm people by dismissing and restricting their experiences and expressions. By not explicitly addressing how gender norms affect our lived experiences, Fall Out Boy leaves its listeners without the tools to see and break past the restrictions created through gender norms and gender policing. And consequently, they risk leaving their listeners further disempowered by the fake reality they want us to destroy.
Do you ever feel like saving the world is overwhelming? Well, if you answered yes, you are not alone. I'm Gregory Wayne, and I'm here to remind you that it doesn't have to all be done at once. Let's take small steps. Let's start in our own backyards and make real progress that we are able to see grow right before our very eyes. By listening to our peers and learning from our past, we can make a real difference that we can share with our friends, families, and members of our community. We can be the trendsetters. We can influence those around us to live more sustainably, not just for ourselves, but for the animals of the environment that have been here long before we have. I don't know what the world will look like in 100 years, but I know together we can lay the foundation for how it should be. To help maintain a healthy environment for the animals in your area, I would avoid using pesticides to kill some mice. Anticoagulant rodenticides, or AR for short, end up doing far greater harm than they do help. Sure, they may kill mice for the moment, but what happens when they die? The poisoned mice end up getting eaten by larger prey animals such as owls and foxes. When these prey animals eat the poisoned rodents, they could end up dead as well, from the transference of toxins by consumption. And if we kill our prey animals, then the mice will run even more rampant. This definitely sounds counterproductive in my opinion. I found an awesome article in the HSU database titled "Natural Ways to Get Rid of Mice." They list great methods to control mice problems, from preemptive measures like not keeping open food out to using peppermint and clove oils to deter critters from coming in your house. The article states that the oils are far too intense for mice and they would rather avoid the area altogether than engage in something so intense. Then there is the time-tested method of simply adopting a cat. These animals do wonders, and they are also cute and furry. I know this list sounds a little silly, but the fact that so many people still use poison to kill mice means we need to take a step back and really think about the outcomes, if the outcomes justify the means. The northern white-spotted owl has been one of the biggest victims of anticoagulant rodenticides. A research study was done by the Avian Conservation of Ecology organization where they tested 10 of these owls for rodenticides. A staggering 70% of the owls actually tested positive for the poison. Not all of the exposed owls will die from the poison, but it is definitely not beneficial for them. They often get sick from ingesting infected rodents and may not be inclined to hunt or reproduce. And for a species so close to the brink of extinction, this can be detrimental to the entire species. It's not all sad though. Saving the world as we know it can actually be a blast. Building habitats in your backyard that support wildlife can be one of the most rewarding things you can do. Even a simple bird feeder can go such a long way. I recently put one in my backyard. It took the birds a few days to realize there was food in my yard, but now that they know, I can't keep them away. I get to see blue jays and all sorts of birds I don't even know the name of every single day. It's pretty awesome. If you're a landowner or farmer, or you even know one and really want to make a difference, I recommend you look into the United States Department of Agriculture Natural Resources Conservation Service, or USDA NRCS for short. They can offer technical support to improve your soil and water quality. I know soil therapy often gets walked on, but it can help so much by increasing yields of your crop and the longevity of your soil, which will in turn help all the animals in the ecosystem to thrive on this land as well. Here are a few tips I learned by doing a bit of investigating and visiting the NRCS website. Tip number 1 is to keep the soil covered. Crimson clovers are a great way to achieve this goal, and they look absolutely stunning. They grow like wildfire and hardly take any care to maintain. You can buy a pack of these seeds off of Amazon for a couple bucks. Heck, if you see me around town, ask me and I'll gladly give you some. Tip 2 is to disturb the land as little as possible. This means no-till gardening. When you dig up or till up a garden, the soil can easily be ran off by a little rainstorm, leaving behind nothing but sand. This is bad for plants on so many different levels. Tip number 3 is to diversify soil biota with plant diversity. Different species of plants are required to support all the different microorganisms living in the soil, and for more exciting tips, I'd love for you to do some healthy research on your own by visiting the Natural Resources Conservation website at www.nrcs.usda.gov. Thank you so much for your time, and have a beautiful day.
Hi, my name is Abigail Grattidge, and the title of my work today is Boys Aren't Bi: The Importance of Representation for Bisexual Men in the Media. What is the first thought that comes to your mind when you hear the term bisexual? For me, I think of a woman. Why might we not think of men as often, and why does this term have the stigma of being just a phase? Those who identify as bisexual or sexually fluid within our society often face discrimination, and this comes from both sides of monosexual culture. Bisexual individuals face unique health effects from this discrimination. Part of the problem is the media's portrayal of bisexual people and the lack of representation, especially for bisexual men, who are viewed the most negatively within the bisexual community. Someone who we do see in the media who identifies as sexually fluid and has confronted these stereotypes is Frank Ocean, a popular hip-hop and R&B artist that addresses them within his music and work. One way he did so was through his self-published magazine, Boys Don't Cry, in which he questioned that hegemonic norm. The purpose of this work is to question the norm that boys aren't bi, by positing more representation of bisexual men within the media to show those who may be questioning their identity and those who discriminate against them that men can be accepted as sexually fluid. To be bisexual means to identify as fluid instead of as monosexual, and being sexually attracted to both the male and female genders. This term is outdated for many, as there are more than the binary genders that exist, and many people choose not to even classify their sexual identity. Some of the terms that fall under the umbrella term of bisexual include fluid, agnosexual, heteroflexible, homoflexible, non-labeling, pansexual, and questioning. This terminology will surely grow and change within the next decade as well. Bisexual people constitute the largest percentage of the LGBTQIA+ community. As a group, bisexual people experience a heavy amount of discrimination and invalidation, which is often referred to as biphobia, binegativity, or bi-erasure. In an article released in 2019 entitled Perceived Discrimination, Coping Mechanisms, and Effects on Health in Bisexual and Other Non-Monosexual Adults by Doe and Van et al., it was found that sexually fluid individuals are the most likely to develop depression, suffer from obesity, and have pain-related symptoms due to stress. Those who experience microaggressions at the intersection of their race, gender, or class reported negative health effects that were impacted further. Many noted that seeking counseling and healthcare services alleviated the physical and mental stress, but there were also reports of people having a hard time receiving appropriate healthcare, as they were also discriminated against by healthcare professionals. Statistically, more women identify as bisexual than men, as found in the study that came out in 2016, Attitudes Toward Bisexual Men and Women among a nationally representative probability sample of adults in the United States by Herbenik Dodge et al. This may be due to the binegativity that men face, especially within Western society that enforces heteronormativity and hypermasculinity. Female bisexuals are more accepted because they do not exclude heterosexuality and so fall under the masculine hegemony that police standards and acceptance. Female bisexuals are often hypersexualized and have been given more approval within Western patriarchal society because they are viewed by the male gaze, and this is reflected in media. There needs to be multiple depictions of bisexual men with different intersectional identities in the media. There has been an increased amount of research on the effect that media has played on attitudes towards sexually fluid individuals. In the article by Nora Madison entitled The Bisexual Scene, Countering Media Misrepresentation, released in 2016, it was found that for these folks specifically, media representation is less common or is counterfactual. Bisexuals are often portrayed as hypersexual and untrustworthy. It is important to depict bisexuality more realistically, emphasizing the individual over sexuality. It is important not just for those seeking information, but for everyone in order to reduce stereotypes and stigma that leave many uncomfortable with claiming their sexual identity. Frank Ocean is one of the few examples of a popular icon within our society that identifies as a sexually fluid man. In an article for The Advocate, Terrence Dean authored The Meaning of Frank Ocean and interviewed people within the hip-hop and queer media industries. Dean shared what Frank Ocean's coming out meant for others. It was sheer joy because he was the first national, well-known artist to come out and announce his sexuality, says Lloyd Thurston. His coming out was a significant moment in a music industry that focuses upon heteronormative ideals. Since his coming out, more hip-hop artists, such as Tyler the Creator, have come forward with non-monosexual identities. And with more acceptance, more artists have been supported with their platforms. His image as a representation has had positive effects for many. To conclude, it is necessary that we break down the stereotypes that follow bisexual men. Although there are different facets of bisexuality, it is clear that it is a lasting identity for many. During the time of exploration for one's identity, it is important to have positive media representation that people can identify with, in order to be more accepting and positive towards themselves. It is also important for monosexual people to see bisexuals cast in a more realistic light in order to reduce stereotypes. Frank Ocean is an example of a sexually fluid man that many people can relate to, especially as a figure in a music industry that is often heteronormative and homophobic. After his coming out, there have been more artists in the music industry who now identify as bisexual. We need more figures across the spectrum of media to counter hegemonic ideas such as Frank Ocean with his self-published magazine, Boys Don't Cry, to show that boys can be bi. Thank you.
Unfortunately, many people do not know the difference between sex and gender. Hello, my name is Lindsey Colbert. Also, some people may think sex and gender need or have to correspond with each other. Gender and sex are two completely different things, and our children do not know the difference. Even adults sometimes do not know the difference. Sex is what a person is biologically born as, male or female. Gender is defined as what is being performed and does not always correspond with the sex a person is born with. Sex and gender sometimes do correspond with each other and sometimes do not. Children watch movies and read books about heteronormative families and see the differences in which boys and girls act. With all these differences seen and put in front of these children, they feel obligated to be placed into these boxes themselves. With these obvious differences thrown into children's faces, these children grow up thinking this is normal and how life should be, with the differences between males and females. I will inform you on how performing the correct gender corresponding with their sex and heteronormativity is pushed upon children since before they were born and continue while the child is growing up. Like I said previously, gender is behaviors and appearances the body performs and society dictates and thinks sex should correspond with the appropriate gender. For example, as females need to be feminine and males need to be masculine. Gendering ourselves and others starts from before birth. Once parents find out the sex of the baby, everything is made for little boys or little girls, and you could definitely tell the difference between the two sexes. The revealing is just the beginning of performing gender, and the child does not even know it yet. The revealing is also known as gender reveals, when it is actually the child's sex reveal, because gender is something that you do rather than what you are. Furthermore, when children see messages on their favorite TV shows or movie, they want to be just like that show or movie they are watching. According to the Communication Research Report, the main theme of the story is love, which is exercised in monogamy, heterosexual, eternal, and self-sacrificing. The aim and meaning of life for the prince and princesses are to make their partner happy. If children grow up only seeing these types of TV shows and movies and they feel their gender does not correspond with their sex, they may think something is wrong with them. If children continue to be exposed to these inequalities and heteronormative movies and shows, these inequalities and boxes we are placing our children into are going to continue, and we will be set in our ways forever. In addition to shows and movies, toys also play a role in gendering our youth. The problem with toys children play with is children are trained to play with certain toys because of what their sex is. According to Communication Research Reports, as children develop, research indicates parents expect and also encourage sex-typed behaviors. Parents expect these behaviors because they think it's just children being children and normal for kids to play like this. Children play what they see, and when little girls want to play house, it's because they see their own family and mom and want to be like them. What children are doing is performing the gender roles they see. Through children's movies, shows, and toys, they see this heteronormativity and gender gaps, but only feed into it because they do not know any better. Unfortunately, these inequalities exist, and these children are performing their gender because since birth, that's all they have known. Once more and more people realize pink and blue are just colors and toys are just objects kids play with, we could dismantle these imaginary boxes we are placing ourselves and our children into. The society we live in may give into this patriarchal system, but that does not mean individuals need to give into the system as well. Teaching children chores and jobs can be done by any sex, male or female, is extremely important because this is a huge way inequality can be stopped. We all need to work toward a more inclusive culture and not put labels and place children into boxes, but allow them to choose what colors, clothes, and toys they like, not based on a certain color, blue or pink.
Thank you for watching. This has been Comm Perspectives as part of the Capstone course in the Communication Department at Humboldt State University.